Hi, yes, I know this topic hasn't been touched on tonight, but global warming and the fact that the left will say that it's more important than the issues we're facing now with ISIS,
Right.
our crappy economy, and the fact that people say cows farting in a field are the cause of global warming.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so when it comes to global warming, there are two issues. Is there such a thing as the greenhouse gas effect? The answer is yes. Is that something that is going to dramatically reshape our world? There's no evidence to show that it will. And is that something that we can stop? There's no evidence to show that we can. So, when it comes to, we should all throw our cars in the river because we have to prevent the global temperature from rising a percentage of a Celsius degree over the next century. It seems to me a very godlike view of what human beings are capable of, particularly since the weatherman can't predict the weather tomorrow, but even climatologists can't predict 10 years from now. I mean, they still can't explain why there's been no warming trend over the last 15 years, right? There's been an absolute static trend with regard to global temperatures over the last 15 years. So I'm not in the mood for throwing out by the way, the one shot that poor people have of becoming rich in the carbon-based economy in order to prevent a slight rise in temperature. As far as the notion that climate change is more important than terrorism or the economy or any of this other stuff, this is Paul Krugman wrote a column yesterday saying exactly this. He said, Paris is bad, but we should really keep our eye on the ball, climate change. And I mean, you have to be highly educated to be this stupid.
Sorry, hold on. Sorry, I'm back. Okay, so this is from Summer at Summer Elizum. She wants to know, has there ever been an experience in which you thought public expression went too far and it should be curbed?
Have I? Sure. I mean, in terms of should the government come in and prosecute somebody for public expression? I've actually changed my views on this over time. I've become significantly more libertarian over the past 7 years as I've watched the president try to crack down on particular kinds of public expression. Do I think that local communities have the capacity? I do think there's a difference between federal, state, and local. So let me start there. I think that there are two questions. One is the principle of freedom of speech and what would I want in my community, and one is what is in the power of local communities versus federal communities, and these are actually two separate questions. I don't think the federal government should be in the business of regulating speech in pretty much any way. I think that local communities, if my little town doesn't want pornography in my little town, I think my little town has the right to ban pornography. I don't think that the founders died on the fields of battle to protect Hugh Hefner putting out naked ladies. I just don't. And so, and this is a pretty well-established First Amendment doctrine as well. So as far as kind of general principles of free speech, I don't think that there is any aspect of political speech that should ever be curbed. I think all aspects of political speech are on the table. I think that there's a difference between political speech and, for example, flag burning. I don't think that flag burning is an expression of free speech. I disagree with the 1989 decision that suggested that free speech was implicated by burning a flag, because you're not. There are certain things that hold us together, and that is one of the very few that does. And the fact that for 200 years everybody interpreted the First Amendment to allow local regulations preventing flag burning is relatively good historical evidence that the founders weren't that fond of it either. So are there certain cases? Yes. Are we anywhere near that on this campus? Absolutely not.
Hi. I would ask what you would say to some of the students who are kind of indifferent about what's going on, maybe not really far to the left or super far to the right either, and just kind of want to get their degree, get a good job, and move on with their lives. Kind of like the gentleman at Dartmouth who just said, when they were chanting Black Lives Matter in the library, he just said, I'm just trying to study for a test tomorrow. Yeah. I mean, what would your suggestion be for those students?
I mean, my suggestion would be, it's a perfect example, the one that you're using. My example would be, well, you're not getting to study, are you? Right? Meaning that you can try to stay apathetic. You can try to stay out of harm's way. You can try to avoid the battle. You can try to maintain your neutrality. You can try to say that I just want to live my life and be left alone. The left will not leave you alone. You are a tool. Okay, for the left, which is in search of utopia, every human being is either a tool or an obstacle. You're either somebody that they can get to ally with them and they can force that, or you're an obstacle to be overcome and to be destroyed. And so it's the easy answer is always I'm just trying to study for a test, and I have sympathies. I think all of us in life have other priorities that are higher than politics. The problem is politics intrudes. So if you want to study for that test, at a certain point you're going to have to say these people are behaving terribly and they need to get out of the library, right? Because if you don't do that, you're not going to get to study in the library. And if there are no behavioral standards whatsoever, then there is no safe space for you if you are not going to, if there are no behavioral standards. I mean, we live in a common society. There are behavioral standards by which we all abide, and these include not being aggressive in manner toward people who have not done anything to you.
I'm Alex. I came all the way from Lawrence, Kansas to see this.
Wow. Okay.
That's some real hot territory. My question actually changed since I come up here. You said that you've moved more libertarian as you've gone on the past couple of years. So a short question for me, and I have another question after this, it's also rather short, is what do you think has been Rand Paul's biggest problem in this campaign? Because early on he was seen as the front runner, but slowly he's fallen towards the bottom.
Okay, so Rand Paul's biggest problem has been ISIS. And it turns out that in a Republican primary you can't be an isolationist who wants to cut defense. That's really been his biggest problem. And because of that, he's done that. His meeting with Al Sharpton was not a big win for him. There's certain aspects of the libertarian position that seem childish to people who vote in Republican primaries, and these include being isolationist on foreign policy and being soft on crime. Criminal justice reform has not been something that is popular among the Republican voting base. The truth is, when it comes to domestic spending policy, for example, I love Rand Paul when it comes to domestic spending policy. When it comes to his foreign policy, I think he's awful. So you sort of have to have both. So that's why Rand Paul has fallen.
And my second question is, how do you explain the rise of Donald Trump and how he is still in the front?
Okay, so this one is always my favorite question. So I've been waiting all night for this. Okay, so the rise of Donald Trump is explained by a couple of factors. The first factor explaining the rise of Donald Trump is that Donald Trump is a hammer in search of a nail, right? And everybody is so annoyed with politics and politicians that we just want to see somebody get hammered. And so it doesn't. So Donald Trump, you'll notice, he as a hammer in search of a nail, sometimes he hits a puppy, right? Sometimes he hits a glass pane, sometimes he hits a child, and sometimes he hits a nail. And when he hits a nail, it's great. So in the span of the last 4 days, we saw Donald Trump go from a 0 to a 10, right? He did his horrible speech in Iowa where he was reenacting Ben Carson's stabbing story and taking his belt buckle and moving to the side of the podium and unbuttoning and moving around his belt buckle like a crazy guy. And everybody was going, what is this? And then 2 days later, or the next day actually, the Paris attacks happen, and he goes on national television and he's asked what he wants to do, and he says, I would bomb the shit out of them. And most Americans go, okay, I get that. I'm there. All right. I don't need a 5-paragraph essay. I'm cool. We got it, right? Trump has a gift for speaking at the lowest common denominator level, which actually it actually is a gift. I mean, it means that you communicate with the most people. And he also has a gift for the soundbite. Both for good and for bad. He's also a dramatic slap in the face to the Republican establishment. There's a whole side of Republicans who just say, you guys were trying to push Jeb Bush on us? Well, screw you. We're going with Donald Trump. And so, which is why all these outsider candidates are doing so well. So, I find Trump highly amusing as a candidate. I find him highly amusing as a person. Would I vote for him in a primary? No. Do I think that I will tell you one thing about Donald Trump. Donald Trump, there's a solid case to be made. This is not even meant to be funny. There's a solid case to be made that he has a better shot of being president than Marco Rubio. And the reason that I say this is because if you look at how Mitt Romney lost the last election cycle, he lost the last election cycle because 5 million white voters did not turn out to vote. Mitt Romney would have had to win. Everybody keeps saying, oh, Marco Rubio will win the Hispanic vote. You know what percentage of the Hispanic vote Mitt Romney would have had to win in order to win in 2012? He would have had to win, according to Byron York at the Washington Examiner, 73% of the Hispanic vote in order to win in 2012. So he ended up winning, I think the statistic was 27% of the Hispanic vote. So what's easier, winning 3% more of the white vote or winning 46% more of the Hispanic vote? And the answer is 3% more of the white vote. So who are these white voters who stayed home in 2012? The white voters who stayed home in 2012 were a bunch of blue-collar voters in swing states like Ohio, right? Who do these people like? Donald Trump. If you look at the polls, blue-collar voters like Donald Trump. In fact, there's another community that Donald Trump does particularly well, and that's the black community. If you look at the polls of Trump in the black community, he's edging on 20% in the black community, which is an unheard of number. It's unheard of. Trump also has the advantage of celebrity. I mean, you can't put it beyond that. I mean, if any other candidate without this level of celebrity did the things Trump did, he'd be done. But Trump's a big celebrity. Everybody recognizes his name. And what celebrity does, celebrity makes you feel like you know the person. And we all feel like we know the people that we watch on TV. There's actually a difference between movie stars and TV stars. My mom works in Hollywood. I have a lot of friends who work in Hollywood. One thing that's weird in LA is if you see a TV star, you're likely to walk up to them and say hello. If you see a movie star, you never will. They're sort of unapproachable because they're on a big screen, so you don't know them. But if you see him on TV, you're like, oh, I know this guy. I see him every single week. He's in my house all the time. Trump is like that. so people feel like they know him. So when he says something totally crazy, it's like if a friend of yours said something totally crazy, you're like, oh, that's just Lou. Lou's always saying that kind of thing. He doesn't mean it. Lou, he's a good guy. He just says crazy stuff. Whereas if it's somebody you don't know and they say, the kind of stuff that Trump says, you go, oh my God, I could never vote for this person. I don't know this man. And he said these kind of things. So that's why Trump is seeing a significant amount of success. Plus, he has taken a very hard line on immigration, obviously. And that hard line on immigration is resonating with a lot of people who have seen not just a major political shift in the United States, but also see this as an actual security issue, which clearly it is.
As someone pro-life, what would you say a good debate against someone pro-choice would be?
What would be a good debate tactic against someone pro-choice? Show them a picture of a baby. End of story.
Is that what you do?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. I think that the idea that, well, I was at the 2012 DNC, the Democratic National Convention, and it was a very bizarre experience because as I was walking around at the 2012 DNC, I walked past, there were a bunch of guys there, and they were wearing buttons that said, I love pro-choice girls. I can't imagine why. And so they're wearing these buttons around, and they were walking blithely past a giant display of people who are carrying, this is an anti-abortion protest, they're carrying all of the aborted fetus pictures. And being from LA, I always tend to think, oh, well, that's just uncouth. Why do we have to look at these pictures? They're gross, that's uncouth. And then it occurred to me, screw uncouth, it's true. I mean, the fact is that people have a you ruined my day syndrome, which is they don't want to see things that are ugly in everyday life, and when you show them things that are ugly, they get upset. Well, you have to make people feel not morally superior for wanting to kill kids, and these are kids. I mean, Hillary Clinton's position, in the Democratic National Committee's position in this race, is that 1 minute before the baby enters the vaginal canal and the vagina somehow confers personhood on this baby, this is not a person, right? This is the okay, I don't have to cite my own child as evidence to the contrary, but everybody's child is evidence to the contrary. I mean, the fact is, the abortion argument is a very simple one. You either believe this is a human life or a potential human life, or you don't. If you don't, then you can do anything you want with it. If you do, you can't do anything with it.
I've heard